Welcome to episode 9. Today I'm going to show you around and show you the progress since the last video. I do want to catch you up on the details and show you how well everything looks. So this is quadrant 1, and you can see we've got the timber cobs, and it's doing really well in this area. We've got the seedling racks here still. We're going to move those out eventually, and a few people have asked about them. We've been moving most of the plants out of here. I'd say almost all the tomatoes are now in the greenhouse. We turned the temperature up to 50 degrees, and we'll do some videos eventually over there with all of the progress and getting ready for the season. We've left the peppers in because they take a little bit longer to get mature, and they're still totally happy. And they're a great size right now, so we're gonna let them stay in here. And a few of you have asked how we get them to grow on this rack where there's no lights. And it's pretty simple. All we do is we rotate them, and it's not ideal, but we're still using what we have. The main key is that we're addressing the weakest link. In the greenhouse, it was too cold to start the seed and be healthy. In here, it was warm enough, and the limiting factor would be light. We overcome that by rotating them. You can see here that this half is a lot healthier than this half. This half was in the shade, and it's not a huge concern, but it is a little bit of an issue. It's not ideal. So we can rotate, and then we can put it a little bit more in the light. These LEDs from all this ambient lighting, there's a lot of light in here, and it could probably be done a lot better with a little tiny shop light or an LED of some sort underneath each rack, but we're not doing that, and I just wanted to address it. Here in this section, what's going to be the show of quadrant 1 will be these earth boxes. And so this one up front is the 3.0, and this is a halitosis, and it did pretty well after transplant. These ones seem to be just slightly more sensitive on the nutrients. In here, this one's recycled. We put craft blend, and we had cover crop, and we churned it in. But overall, it's getting really bushy, and it seems like the halitosis are doing that. This is the halitosis number 1. It was marked female. You can see the leftover mulch from the transplant. But you can also see some of the mycelium growing that's from the kashi blend that we put under here to start to activate that mulch layer. And it's really neat. Alan from Grow Kashi, he taught us that putting this down in the top of the mulch layer will start to intelligently break down the nutrients and deliver to them to the plants. And so while each person that uses an Earthbox has their own style, we've noticed that a lot of different methods work with these, and we really encourage gardeners to work with them because they're so much fun. We've watered down the hole one time. And it's kind of hard to tell, but it's really easy in here when you have the lights. You just peek down there and it reflects, and you can tell there's water. Pretty soon when the reservoir goes dry, we're going to water again. Because we're using living soil that has a high percentage of compost, we're not going to keep the reservoir full. At the Earthbox website, they mention wanting to keep the reservoir full, and they also don't really recommend using the type of soil that we use in here. And so the rule set that we've come up with is you can use our soil, but you must let the reservoir go dry. That keeps air in there. Our soil is a little bit heavier, a lot more natural than just the average potting soil potting mix. It's really more of a soil. It has rock dust and copious amounts of compost. This one here is a fresh one. This is the BuildASoil 3.0. It's the same recipe we're using in the quadrant 3 back there, but the reason I mention that is they both look good. This soil's already been grown in once, harvested, and replanted again. This one is fresh and brand new, and I'll show you underneath here. There's the same thing happening from the kashi blend, and it's nice and moist in here. And this is protecting it from the light, and eventually this space that's in here, because it's only one bag of soil, 1 cubic foot, we're gonna be able to top dress more amendments and pile on the compost. In fact, if we really needed to, we could pile the compost this high underneath this layer, and because we water down below, it won't matter that it's a mound up here, and the feeder roots will adjust to that compost on top, and we can grow a pretty large plant out of these 2 small earth boxes. And let's go to the next quadrant. I could talk all day just about the earth boxes, so I want to move on. I'll be sure to talk more about those as we get into it and the watering schedule. So far, I top watered once, and as soon as the plant started to grow, I bottom watered once, and we transplanted 4 days ago. In this bed, in the 3x3, I want to talk about several things, but first I'll address the watering. The day we watered on video, I showed you how I added 5%, and that was 3.5 gallons because there's 70 gallons of soil in here. So I added 3.5 gallons of water. I did that with my Chapin sprayer, and I did it with a 1 gallon per minute nozzle, and I stood here and I drained the entire pump sprayer into here. After doing that, after I transplanted, I've watered one more time that volume, and the reason why I did it twice is it was a little bit on the drier side when I was done setting up the bed, and it was ready to receive probably a 10% watering. I didn't want to overdo it the first day at transplant and drown my new transplants. And they did well. They told me they needed a little water. The humidifier had kicked off once and ran out of water. And so I went ahead and I gave them a good watering, one more Chapin sprayer full, 3.5 gallons, and I got no runoff. And now I'm happy with it. I feel like the moistness is even all the way through. And if you look in the mulch layer here, there's a mushroom log I'll talk about in a second. But I wanted to show you is peek down here. You can see the cover crop coming through. Some of the leaves that I pinched off the plant are already decaying. And when I pull up this layer, even in the far corner, it's nice and moist in there. And that's what I'm looking for. I don't want it to be dry under the mulch. I want the plants to be happy. But even though it's moist there, I want to keep it that way. I don't want to overdo it. So I'm not going to water today at all. They have plenty of moisture in here. I don't want to create a habitat where it is excessively moist. That leads to anaerobic conditions. There can be fungus gnat problems and other issues. And as long as you keep it like this, things will do really well. And some other things to look for, if you just set up a bed like this and your plants are droopy, they're droopy either because you've overwatered or underwatered. And if you address our watering practices and how much moisture we've put in, you could probably tell if you've done more than that or less than that and answer your own question. Now, if you're thinking you might have underwatered because you're trying to be cautious, they'll be droopy and might be getting a little bit crispy and might be getting a little bit of different colors. See how this leaf is really even in color? It might be getting burnt tips a lot more than that and tips along the edges. When you get a dry down, that increases the solution of nutrients that's available, and the biology is constantly making it available. And so there could be some sodium in there or some excessive nutrients that when the moisture goes down, the amount of nutrients in that little water is kind of a lot for the plant. And so we want to keep it happy by addressing that. Now the opposite would be yellowing of the lower leaves. Now there might be a couple leaves when you first transplant that I plucked off that would have yellowed on their own, but anything without this turgor, see how it's holding itself up? It's got a nice, it's not droopy and it's not yellowing with like a fade. If it starts to change to a lighter green color and it's drooping, you may have overwatered. And at that point, you want to make sure that you don't water again and then exacerbate the problem. We've got 4 plants in here and I at least want to address which are which so you can track along the way. So I'll tell you which side is which. Over here, if you look, we've got the Branson's Royal Revenge, and those are the green plant tags that we have here. Let me pull it out of the mulch layer here. So it's labeled Burr, or Branson's Royal Revenge number 9, female. And these two are the Branson's Royal Revenge. You'll notice that they look similar in that they both have large leaves. They're both a little bit more uniform in that they have a perpendicular structure. They didn't broaden out with these side branches. And we've done no training on here on any of these plants. So this is totally natural according to their 1 gallon shape they were previously in. Some of them branched a little more in that 1 gallon and some of them didn't. And the Bransons are a little bit more broadleaf, less likely to branch like the other one. Where the other one, all of them seem to have branched out a little bit more, including the 2 in the Earthboxes. Those were both halitosis. These are both Branson's Royal Revenge. Now, that doesn't mean anything about the quality. These are both going to be phenomenal quality. It just speaks to the differences. You could certainly start training. If you only had 1 plant in here, you'd want to start pinching or you'd want to start topping. And I have a preference, and we'll do another episode on plant control. I've talked a lot about it over the years. If you check out our Instagram, you can find examples. I will be building a screen on here. I will be doing minimal training. My goal is to flip to flower soon and show you how simple this can be in a fast process without going for the maximum screen full. Just getting really beautiful plants and selecting a keeper to run for the next round in the same soil. So this is the shiitake mushroom log, and this is a half one. It was just brought down as a sample. We work with a local mushroom farm, and they produce a whole bunch of different organic mushroom products. Some of the products that we use from them include this mulch that's in here. And so we like working with local businesses. We also like that they have a similar mindset and values to us. And they brought this in and we decided that we're gonna offer it. All right, so here's what it looks like. And it's already producing something that's pretty much ready to harvest. And it'll keep fruiting. And these are the shiitake. And these are wood-eating mushrooms. And so that's why they're growing on a wood log, so to speak. This is, you can tell, manufactured from sawdust and a few other additives that are all organic. There'll be limited batch production, so check for availability. But when you get it, you're gonna soak it in water, and that's it. Put it somewhere where it has nice conditions. Most of us here at BuildASoil, including the staff, we add mushrooms to our diet. The other benefit that a lot of growers talk about is that mushrooms produce CO2 and plants need CO2. There's a synergistic relationship there. So we're not planning to offer it as a CO2 producing mechanism. This is for food production, but there is going to be some benefit there, and I think that's worth looking into. So let's take a look at quadrant 3, and this is where we have 7.5 gallons of soil, 1 cubic foot. We took one of our bags and opened it of each one of our 4 recipes, and you can tell they're really liking it. They've done great, they've transplanted well. So these are displaying a lot of the characteristics that I look for after a transplant. We transplanted 4 days ago on Monday, and you can see the turgor. It's the ability of the leaf to lift itself up like this and have this shape to it. And most of the time when you start growing plants, you come to see that as a sign of plant health. You can tell it's kind of reaching for the light. And so there's a number of factors that might cause that, but overall, it's a great sign and they're transplanting well. The plants usually transplant really well into the light soil. These ones back here are loaded with nutrients, including our 3.0, our Ollie, and our Malibu. And they're also doing great. So it's nice to see every recipe we make performing really well after a fresh transplant, especially when we're doing these not live, but we're doing it where there's no chance of us switching these out. I mean, we're pretty much live. Even though we get to edit the videos, we can't edit the process. All 4 of these plants, if you can guess by looking at the structure, these are the Branson's Royal Revenge. And we tried to keep all 4 the same so we could have a little bit more of a comparison on all 4 soil recipes. But since they're from seed, it won't be an exact comparison because some of them are going to naturally have different shapes than others. That's just how seed works, unless it's totally stable, which is like a long-term breeding project. Okay, let's take a look here. You can see that it's starting to get some side branching now that it's been transplanted, and the roots will naturally follow the shape of the container. So I expect this to get a little bit bushier regardless of which genetics they are. But we've not done any training to give these lower branches any advantage. And there's a lot we could discuss about giving these lower branches an advantage. One alternate method is removing the lower branches. If we wanted to flip to flower now, I'd expect these plants to get about double the height. And so it's important that you plan far ahead, and when you're running small containers, we really remember that. Because if we end up getting the plants to this size before we flip to flower, we're gonna double from there and we might run out of soil. No matter how good the soil is, we're gonna be taking from it to produce a plant. And so we wanna manage the plant to container size relationship. And if that's considered, you can grow in a very small container. Challenge is most people want to grow in a small container and get really big yield. And that's more of a hydroponic paradigm. In living soil, it's very important that we keep that ecosystem and relationship alive, and it'll reward us with really high yield. If we go from a 7.5 gallon to a 15 gallon, we should see a 60% increase in yield. So keep that in mind if you want to step up in container size. That's not directly linear. You can increase the yield here, and we're going to show you how. We're going to top dress later, we're going to brew up some teas later, but for now you can see all I've needed to add was the initial transplant solution we showed you in the last episode, and since then we've only watered twice. So over 4 days we watered every other day since then, and we watered about 5% each time. So in here that would be half of 3/4 of a gallon. It's easier to say it that way, I think. A lot of times people measure by the gallon. Let's go on to the next quadrant. There's a few back here I'll mention. These are some that we were identifying maybe as females. We decided not to plant, and I'll address this one in the back corner in the last episode. We were guessing. It turned out to be female. So our intuitions were right, and that's great for us. We did get, I think, one more female identified. We're gonna give away today, and I'll check on that later. I bet you it's showing right now. So that's good news. Over here, we're now in quadrant 4, and I wanted to talk about a few things that have changed. You might have noticed that some of the plants off the racks are moving around, and this tomato plant right here, we put a string on, and you can see that it's rolled all the way up and it's tight. And this is because it's gonna climb this like a vine, and we use these specialty clips, which we've always carried. A lot of our customers use these on bamboo stakes just to take branches and clip them to it. But they're really designed to pinch the string. The string fits right in the wedge, and it allows you to pinch the string. And then it just holds the plant in line with where you pinch it. So they're super easy to apply, they don't hurt the plants. And what we did to get it to this point is we removed all of the lower branches up until this last branch below the fruit. This last branch here we could probably remove, but it is receiving light, it is helping it grow. And so it's more about what we'd like to keep on in the future. If you see right here, this is what they call a sucker. There's already fruit above it on this main branch. This is something that receives the light and helps it grow. And in between here is another set that could become a branch that would produce fruit. If we wanted to vine all the way up, we'd like to keep its energy directed towards the main center line. And so we're gonna remove that right now, and that'll keep this growing vertically. You can see these are gonna become flowers. By the end of this series, we're gonna see them all the way to the ceiling in here. And so it's really fun. It's a small volume of soil. So we're gonna use some of the same tricks that we use over there to get bigger plants in here to keep it healthy. We also moved the pepper plant into a area where it wasn't in the way because I've got extra space right now. And it's loving the amount of light that it's getting over here because obviously it's under the brighter light. And it seems to have like doubled in size in here. It's pretty cool. It's starting to put out some of its first flowers, which will then turn into peppers. And so that's a good sign. It's still producing really big leaves. It seems to like it in here. Even though it's humid, it's not getting any of that like dimpling that you sometimes see on indoor peppers. So I'm really happy with the way things are going. And it seems like it's liking the 3.0 right now in this little tiny container. So the pepper's there. It's going to be producing soon. Over here, we harvested the lettuce pretty recently. I think 3 or 4 days ago, and it's already starting to grow back on some of the areas that we didn't harvest quite as deep. And over here, you can tell some of these vines are a little bit long. It's because we overseeded it. And when we overseed it and don't exactly place the seed, you get a lot of competition, but I'm still optimistic that it's gonna all grow back in here very soon. And we'll continue to eat from it. Over here on the rack, we took all the good cucumbers out. We were doing a little experiment with some old seed and it germinated very poorly, while the rest did almost perfect germination. So we're gonna cherry pick some of the best from here. We've got another experiment that we're working on. We've got a special transplanter we'll show you later, and it uses these paper pots. And these unlink and they become kind of like ammunition to a machine gun. All of these cells unlink in a straight line and go down a special hand plow attachment that bury those in the soil and then cover the furrow behind it so that you transplant that entire tray in like 1 minute. Really exciting. Over here, the kale just continues to grow. If you saw in one of the previous videos, we removed almost all the leaves and they're back and big again. And so that's pretty good to see. As we remove the rest of these trays, we'll get into doing potentially some microgreens, and we're gonna do some sprouts that we've talked about but haven't had the time to do since doing the farm starts. So look for that coming in some of the future videos. That covers it. Most of that work was done in the last episode. Now it's been checking. It's really just been waves of energy. Besides all the farm stuff, I just waited to address that once these transplanted, it seemed like there was new growth and that they were happy in their home. They weren't sad. Once I saw that they were happy, that gave me the confidence to bottom water. With an Earthbox system, if you have a really small plant and it's not drinking right away and you have lots of compost in there, it can get a little funky down in the reservoir, so I like to wait. Other than that, that's almost the only consideration. The rest of these were kind of on autopilot besides the basic watering. We're gonna do some quick FAQ about the grow room environment and some of the technology that we're using. So I wanna address what we're using. I've got a few different types. They're all made by Timber grow lights, and we really have come to like them. They're a really high quality manufacturer, and they use some really high quality components. Up here is a 50-watt cob setup. So each one of those is 50 watts. The whole setup is 600 watts, and it's dimmable. I've got it turned all the way up right now so that we can hit all the way to the floor down here. Over here, we have more of a strip style, where you can see lots of small chips instead of the big round ones. And those seem to be a little bit more uniform. However, both perform well. These are my newest favorite. And so we've got 2 of those since I love them so much. Those are from the last grow, and they're the Timber Cypress 8. And a lot of our customers have come back and bought their second round of them already. They're really pleased with them. They're built really, really well, and they're gonna last a long time. And that's important. There's a lot of problems out there with grow light manufacturers. And these ones are, looks like about 5 feet off the height, the top of the plants here. And this puts it in about that 500 par range, maybe just slightly less, which is really good for this stage of growth. DLI, or Daily Lighting Integral. And it's based on the photosynthetic active radiation, or the type of light that the lights produce. And to put it really simple, you don't want too much light, you don't want too little light. And to know that, you can actually look up your manufacturer's specs at certain distances, or you can buy a meter that tells you. Once you have that information, you can determine how many hours a day you run your light. Once you know how many hours and how powerful, it comes up with a formula. And the plants like to be at a certain number in their vegetative growth, and they like it relatively higher in flower. And so we'll address that a little more later, but you can tell that when you get things right, the plants really do well. And one of the biggest things with living soil is the environment is the only thing you really can control, and then they're gonna speed up their job. And hydro, you can kind of force feed them. I have to ask them. And to do that, we have to steward the environment into a situation where they can grow at an explosive rate. And that has to do with temperature and humidity and lighting. And so we set it at a range where it's just at the high end of what the lights produced. So we have it at 78 degrees in here. What that does is that triggers, when it gets up to 78, the fan. The fan kicks on, it sucks all of the air out. That brings in, through passive ventilation, it sucks fresh air in. The fresh air brings fresh CO2. That's what plants need. It's like oxygen to us. And so it allows more fresh air to come in. When that happens, that will actually trigger the humidifier. We have an active air commercial humidifier that's hooked up to a 5-gallon reservoir, which is enough for about a day at a time if we're running the fan a lot. So I would recommend a larger reservoir, but it's worked really well for us when we're here every day. As soon as the fan kicks on, it lowers the humidity. And if we don't address that, the plants will react negatively. And so we pump the humidity in as the air goes out. If you get that cycle right, if you have a smaller humidifier, you can make sure that you don't cycle your fan as often. If you have a big humidifier, you can humidify your outside room called the lung room. Either way, the goal is to keep it at a very consistent rate in here. And we've been able to do that, and the plants are growing really fast because of it. If you want to research more of this, look up vapor pressure deficit, or VPD, and look up daily lighting integral, or DLI. There are hundreds of videos, there's lots of information, and it'll make you a better grower to learn about this stuff. This oscillating fan, a few people have asked about, we just use zip ties, if you see right here, to attach it to the rack. Normally what I do is I use zip ties to attach it into the top corner of the tent, and I'll normally put several. Right now it's working the way it is. As we go into flower, we might put one more in here to keep the air moving. Not only do you need fresh air coming into the tent, but you need that air to be moved around the plant leaves so it can breathe the CO2 so it doesn't get suffocated in its own fresh air. And this helps with that. It also adds a little bit of structural integrity to the plants as they get blown around. It's more natural. This fan, we took the front plate off. The reason why we do that is if you've had grow tents for a while, you've known that these fans, either you get lucky and they last forever, or every other one you get breaks. And so we've had a number of different manufacturers. This is one we used to carry. We now have a different brand. They seem to perform pretty well, but statistically some of them will break. If that happens, we're here to support you. You get a refund on it, or an exchange. And one of the things to mitigate that is we actually leave the front panel off when it's oscillating, and inside of it there are plastic gears, and we have moisture in here and all this stuff. The thing that's prone to breaking is the plastic gears, so taking a little weight off is why you see no shield on here. I leave the back on because it'll actually cut your finger if you're unaware, or your ear or something. And so that at least helps a little bit. Kind of a common thing you see with growers. A lot of times they'll leave those off. And so I just wanted to address why you might see that. It's definitely not the safest thing. When you get the really powerful ones, they can actually cut you pretty good, but it makes a difference in the fan life. Any brand will work. We've tried maybe 5 or 6 brands. I was gonna say a dozen, but I'd be exaggerating. And most of them come from similar manufacturers. We imported one really good one from Canada and had issues with getting inventory. And even then, you pay for a more expensive fan that eventually fails. So I think this is a good model. And as long as you treat them well, and between each grow, I take it apart and I clean it, and it lasts a lot longer. Have a compressor, blow it out. Little things like that will make your equipment last longer. And sometimes it's not about the price of the equipment, it's about the plastic waste and just trying to keep things as long as we can. This is already hypocritical enough to try and be organic with all this electricity and grow lights. What I want you to do is, if you like this content and you've enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up when you're done watching. Next up, you're gonna be surprised, but these plants are gonna grow relatively quickly, and we're gonna be going to flower. I'm not gonna promise when, but in the coming future, not too many episodes in the distant future, we're gonna be flipping to flower, which means we're gonna have lots to talk about. Things are gonna start moving quick. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.